Okay, let's talk about Evil. Evil is streaming on Netflix, the first season of it. The second season, I believe, is on Paramount Plus. That's like a CBS streaming platform. But I only watched the first season of Evil on Netflix. And oh my God, it's so good. I watched it so fast. I watched it in like 5 days. It is a little bit creepy, scary in the beginning. But once you kind of get used to how the show is revealing things or like what the show is about, then you realize, okay, it's not that scary. But it is pretty disturbing, some of the stuff that the show talks about. And then also depending on your own beliefs about evil and stuff like that, it might be disturbing to you in that way too. I personally don't believe in evil, and I don't believe in possession, which that's a big part of the theme of this show is about that, right? How evil can seep into humankind and seep into people and make them do horrendous things. So the premise of the show is that you have Kristen, who is a forensic psychologist, and she gets hired by David, who's an assessor for the Catholic Church. So what happens is like the church gets a lot of reports of people being possessed or like there being miracles or something like that. And then so the church sends out people like David to go out there and check out, see if it's the real thing, you know, see if they think that it actually is a possession and then what to do about it, or if it's a miracle and what to do about it. Like just like religious type phenomena like that, right? And then David also has somebody working for him named Ben, who's like a all-around handyman contractor slash tech guy. So you got all three areas covered, right? So you have Kristen, who then becomes their psychological, medical advisor. And then you have David, who is a priest in training. He's not yet a priest, but he's like 2 years into the program, gonna be a priest. And so he knows all of the religion stuff, religious history and rules and guidelines and whatnot, right, of the church. And then you have Ben, who can investigate things that are of a more physical or a technologically based nature. And so the three of them form a team and they go assess these cases for the church. So both Kristen and Ben are skeptics. Like they don't believe in any of this stuff, right? And David believes in all of it, like angels, demons, and of course, you know, God, all of it. Kristen used to be Catholic, but she's no longer Catholic. And her philosophy is that if it can't be proven by science, then it's not real. And David, he has this quote right here that's pretty good. He says, science is only good for repeatable phenomenon. And most of life, the most interesting parts don't repeat. So science doesn't recognize it. And so that's how he's describing miracles. So like in each case that they go through, they try to throw in like scientific and religious explanations, and then they go through it and see which one it actually is. And it's interesting to see how far each of the characters will approach, kind of like touch on the other side of their belief, right? Where even though each of them are like hardcore in their own beliefs, that when something unexplainable by their own beliefs is presented to them, like how willing they are or unwilling they are to walk over to the other side and say, okay, you know, maybe that can explain it. And on the more personal side of things, Kristen's story is that she is a mom of 4 little girls, and she used to be a mountain climber, but since she had kids, you know, she's the one who stays with the children while her husband, who's her climbing partner, still goes out there and does tours and stuff around the world. So he's gone. Like at the beginning of the show, he's not there and he hasn't been there for a while. And so when David shows up, there's this kind of chemistry between Kristen and David. And so if you think about evil, you think about sin and stuff like that, like the story also kind of gets into what about this attraction between two people? One of them is married, one of them is going to be a priest, right? So it kind of gets into that a little bit. And it also talks about like people being tempted by things and being offered things. And it's like how the person then decides, and a lot of it is based on decision, right? You have a choice. Do you choose to go this way or this way? Is this in accordance to your own moral code, and how much do you stick to that, or how easy is it for you to lean to the other side and do something that you think is wrong, right? And then how do you justify that? And so the show is really interesting and deep, and it's really fast paced too. And you know how you can get into a story and into the characters and then they do stuff that you're like, no. and then you get mad at them. Like this story really sucks you in and can get you upset. And I had to remind myself a couple of times there. I'm like, okay, I'm just watching TV. There's nothing serious going on here. And to just like pull my emotions back from, running off like that. But yeah, it's really good. I really recommend it. Okay, let's get into some spoiler stuff. Are you ready? Okay. Leland Townsend. He is such a good bad guy. He's like the thing that got me upset was him like wheedling his way into these people's lives, into Kristen's lives, like getting close to the girls, getting close to the grandma, Kristen's mom. And I'm like, no. And how like Cheryl, the mom, I don't know about her taste in men. I mean, okay, the hiccup guy, we don't know much about him, but he seemed like a way better choice than Leland Townsend. Even with the first words that came out of his mouth, like when he inserted himself into their date, right? He was so rude. Just the stuff. I mean, she even acknowledged that whatever he said could have been really upsetting to people, but like, why is she attracted to that? I have no idea. I found him really creepy and slimy. But then, of course, I was able to witness all the other stuff that he's done to Kristen and stuff like that. So very biased. But even so, though, like even after Kristen told Cheryl that this guy is a psychopath, how is it that Cheryl does not immediately freak out about it? Like, her daughter is a really good forensic psychologist. She's good at her job, And how could she just like not believe her and take Leland's word for things? It is interesting what he says about himself when he was inserting himself onto Cheryl's date like that, where he said that he used to apologize for everything because he was afraid to offend people. And then he stopped doing that. And I feel like that's a true story, especially after Kristen outed him for being Jake the Flake, and that Leland Townsend's like this whole other persona that he just adopted, and that's not who he really is, and he's actually this other person that used to be in the marching band. And it was so hilarious when he was saying like, what do people have against marching bands? That's a worthy entertainment. That was so funny. But yeah, I feel like he was really describing who he used to be, and that what seemed to have happened is that he felt really powerless, and then, he met the devil, and the devil probably offered him more power. And I think that's how evil gets into people's lives, is that you're feeling powerless, you're not feeling good about yourself, and then these people, these demons, the devil, come and they offer you, we're going to give you more power, and you come work for us, be on our side, help us spread this quote evil, right? But they're all given a choice, because that was evident throughout, like with that kid, Sebastian, the hacker guy, who, when he accidentally shot himself, I laughed out loud so hard. But yeah, at each point of him being guided towards the path of killing people, he had a decision to make. Leland always posed it to him that way, like, choose this or choose this, choose this or choose this. And that person has to make the choice to choose evil over another path. Like, I think they're making it a point where it's never forced on anybody. And on the same track with that, that one episode where the pregnant lady with the twins thought that the baby boy might be possessed, and the priest says, no demon can possess a person until the person gives an invitation. So he said that an unborn child cannot be possessed because it can't give permission, it can't give an invitation. So there's that decision-making process. Again, you have to decide to let in the evil in order for the evil to come in. And there's your free will. And it's kind of like your power is in your free will, but then like the evil is offering you what appears to be more power, but you're actually giving away your power in order to gain that other power that they're promising you. When in actuality, your true power is your power of choice, right? To always choose good or choose love or choose the higher vibe. They're kind of offering you, hey, we have this shiny thing over here. If you choose over here, then you're basically digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole, but then you don't know that until you're actually in the hole. Then you kind of feel like, oh, I'm powerless against this thing that has its hold on me, right? Kind of like that one lady that I thought that was so interesting, how David talked her into kicking the demon out because she felt powerless against it and she was afraid. But then the quote exorcism was really David telling her, no, you do have the power and you can just kick him out. And so she did. So the show talks about 6 different types of possession, which I think they're getting this from the actual Catholic Church, that there are 6 different types. And most of them, I kind of feel like it's just somebody having a hard time in life, right? Because they got a couple of ones where it's like, if somebody is sick or they're injured, then they're calling it a demon being inside of a person. And then there's this other one where it's like, if you have constant, overwhelming, and irrational thoughts. And then the one, the demon torments a person causing tragic events in their lives. Like, that's just people not understanding how they're creating their lives. And it's not that there's some other being that's controlling everybody, you know? But this is how it's being explained, and there's like 6 different types. The ones that I had heard of from like movies and stuff like that, the demonic possession is a demon taking over a person's body without their consent. And then the other one was that the possessed invites a demon into their lives, like through Ouija board or, pledging their soul to the devil or something like that. Like you see that on TV and in movies all the time. And so those are the ones that I was aware of. But like these other ones, they just seemed like, somebody's having a hard time and they're calling it a possession. And they're explaining it by saying, oh, there's evil in the house or there's evil taking over or something like that. Actually, the one that said the number 1 type of possession, the demonic possession of the demon taking over a person's body without their consent, that actually conflicts with what the priest said in that other episode about like the unborn child can't give consent or can't give an invitation, so it can't be possessed. Like, doesn't that conflict with that? It's saying the opposite thing, because this one is saying is without their consent, but you always have to give consent. So whatever they're saying conflicts with itself. Okay, let's talk Kristen. Her relationship with her husband, I kind of feel like if he had been around the whole time and not left her alone so much, that she wouldn't feel any kind of attraction towards David. So I kind of feel like that's a product of their agreement to be separated for long periods of time. And then when he came back and found her changed, right, that he tried to offer her like her chance at going out mountain climbing and that he would stay with the kids. He was trying to like undo some of that and bring their relationship back to where it was before. But I feel like she's grown so much during this time of starting this new job, right? That even if it wasn't about her attraction to David, which I don't think it really is about that, I think it's about like her eyes being open to new things and new experiences through this job. And just her beliefs are changing, you know, that she's becoming a different person because she's having more different experiences. And with partners, I feel like anytime you try to stuff a person back into a box when they've outgrown that box, it doesn't work. You know, you gotta let a person grow. Even if that person grows away from you, they have to go through their own personal development, their own personal growth. And each partner has to do that. And to have a relationship that stays together, you have to grow together down towards the same path. Like if two people are growing and they're growing in separate paths, you have to let it go. And of course, you know, choice comes into that too, where you choose to grow together, right? But then there are instances, you know, where people grow apart and you kind of have to let that happen and not try to stop a person's growth. And even for you yourself, like you shouldn't stop your own growth in order to stay in a relationship because it's not going to last. It's not going to work. I don't think that Kristen and her husband are at that point yet where she's going to completely grow away from him. But they're kind of at that decision point, like, are you going to choose to grow together? And he's choosing to stay. He's choosing not to go off on another run, you know, out in the world doing tours and stuff like that. So he's choosing to stick around. And I think a big part of it, though, I mean, yes, he wants to save his relationship, but a big part of it has to do with his insecurity because he thinks that there's something going on between her and Ben, which that's not the guy you need to worry about, dude. But even though the story so far hasn't made him that endearing, I was so glad when he came back. And because the girls alone with their AR game, the augmented reality game, and that stalker character inside the game leading them to play Ouija board and stuff like that, I was like, no, don't leave these girls alone with anybody, because it's just like, because they're young, right? And it just feels like that's that one big vulnerable spot right there where you don't want any harm to come to them, right? And so anytime an adult would step in and kind of like save the girls or like to guide them back, you know, into a safer place, it was such a relief. Like that one time when Ben did it, when he showed up and stopped them from playing the game. And then that second time when the dad came back and said, okay, let's go close the portal of the Ouija board. Like it was such a good thing that he just like took over and like he walked right through the projection of the Rose 390 character, right? And just went and closed the portal. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad he was there. But I did think it was strange when he was asking Kristen if she was unlapsed, which I didn't know what that meant. I had to look it up. But so there's this thing about being a lapsed Catholic where I guess you either quit being Catholic or you stop it for a while. And then when you're unlapsed, it means you're going back to the religion. And he was asking her if she was going back to it. And she was saying no, but then he was kind of giving her a hard time about that. But then later on, so it kind of appeared like he was even more hardcore facts and science and not into all the frou-frou stuff. But then he ended up doing that, was it Tibetan chant? And he was doing that prayer. And, you know, I'm all for people meditating. You know, anytime anybody says they're going to do meditations and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, go for it. But somehow when he started doing that, and I was like, something feels off. Something feels so off about this. And then they showed his girls had learned it too, and they were doing it. I'm like, oh, this feels so wrong. Why does it feel wrong? And then later on, he reveals that was a Tibetan prayer for him to switch lives or switch places with his daughter that was sick. And I was like, oh, that is so bad. I think it was supposed to be like he would die in her place or something like that. I was like, no. And so it was so funny that it felt completely off to me. And yeah, it is completely off. Like, that is not a good idea. So I liked every part of the show, even the parts that, made me upset with Leland and stuff like that, where he got me upset. Even that was good in terms of like the story. The only part that I disagreed with the show was the episode with the little boy who tried to poison his family and then tried to drown his sister. I disagreed with the parents killing the little boy to keep the baby safe. That part, I just felt like the whole energy of the show, even though, the whole thing is talking about evil, it's all negative, energy, right? But when that happened and they killed the little boy, and I was like, they didn't have to do that. They really didn't. But, again, about choices, right? That was their choice to do that because they felt so powerless. They felt so unsafe with the little boy, with their son in the house. And they felt like there was no other way out. So that was the choice that they made. But I just felt like, okay, now that he's tried to drown a baby, like, I feel like the authorities would then take over and take him away from the house. Like, they wouldn't have to worry about him being in the house anymore. But they couldn't wait for that. They just decided to take care of it themselves right then and there. And like the energy, like for me, watching the show, like even though all sorts of other bad stuff happened, right? The energy for me just like dropped right there. And I was like, ooh, that one didn't feel good at all. But every other part of the show, of the story, like I was fine with it, and it was exciting and dramatic, and even if bad stuff happened, it was still exciting. But that was the one thing where I was like, that one didn't feel good at all. But the rest of that episode was good though, because that was the episode where the daughters were playing with the AR headsets, the scary game. And so that was when Ben came in and said, nope, you guys aren't playing this. And so I really like his relationship that develops with the girls through the season. That's really cool. And especially like when they drew a picture of him and stuff like that. I thought that was so cute. So Kristen's arc through the season, she starts off being all about truth. She won't tell a lie in court, and she's all about finding out the truth with science and stuff like that, the facts. And then as she's immersed into this world where things aren't always explained by science and facts, then she starts to kind of open her mind a little bit more to different ways of explaining things, right? In some ways, in some of the episodes, but most of the time she's still sticking to whatever makes sense to her. But then you start to see her moral code start to change as she is dealing with Leland and his evil, right? And his I feel like he's kind of like manipulating her in a way by getting her upset like that and making her feel unsafe, that she would then make choices that she wouldn't normally make, that kind of go against her own moral code. Like when she allowed Ben to deep fake Leland's voice to put it in as evidence in court, right? So that he couldn't be a fair witness in one of the cases. And she's like step by step stepping across that line of honor and integrity, that she had drawn for herself. But then she's doing it just to win against Leland. And I feel like that's what evil, is wanting her to do. And you see her taking the steps, like each part of the way. And then like when he showed up at her house and he was singing with her kids and stuff like that. And that was really creepy. But that was just another one of those things where Leland does something to evoke that kind of anger and fear inside Kristen, that sense of protectiveness, right, for her kids, that she goes and slices his neck, just enough so that he needs to go to the hospital real fast or bleed out. I mean, I feel like that's like yet another step down her path toward evil. And then even that moment when she was firing back at him and letting him know that she knows who he really is, and cutting him down and saying, I mean, it's justified in the sense that, he is a horrible person and she's just telling him how horrible and how powerless he really is. But I didn't feel right. It didn't feel right to me when she was doing that, because I felt like it was like another thing that was moving her in the direction of evil. And so when she had that dream that was like replaying the scenes of her like throughout the season, and instead of Orson LaRue, the guy from the first episode, attacking her, then it was like she became lucid, right? So she knew, and she whacked him over the head with a chair. And then instead of the demon George slicing into her, she stabbed him instead. And it was like each time that she was winning over the bad guy, it seemed like she was gaining more power for herself by one-upping the bad guy, but then it's then turning her into the bad guy. And then like within that dream, the devil, the goat devil guy is applauding her, meaning like she's doing a good job being more evil now. And it's like, it's ultimately what he wants her to do, is to fight back and be angrier and want to win over the bad guys. And then at the end, when she, found that the cross burned her hand, even though I was surprised, I was like, oh, is she possessed now? But it kind of makes sense, right? Because like every step of the way, she's being kind of herded more and more in that direction. And I was like, if the episode were to continue on, then, if Ben were there, Ben would, then check to see if there was some chemicals in the bathroom or something like that, some kind of explanation for why the cross would burn her, right? But I was thinking, though, the fact that Kristen would even suspect herself enough to test herself with the cross, it must mean that she did something, because at that point, like, it hasn't been revealed yet whether she killed LaRue or not. And so, but the fact that she would even think to test herself with the cross, right, then she must be either guilty or something. Like, why would she even test herself if she hadn't done anything, right? So that's so exciting how they ended that. Okay, let's talk David. So when he first comes on and you're introduced to this character, it's like he comes off as this really kind of zen kind of dude, right? And he's very likable. There's just something about his demeanor, how he's like really calm, and juxtaposed to his physicalness, because he's like this massive muscly dude, right? But then his personality is just really calm and really a fair kind of guy. And I say that because like he is a very God-loving, faithful person, but he is fair-minded enough to want to hire someone like Kristen and also be working with someone like Ben, both of whom are skeptics, right? So it's not like he's so God-minded and Catholic-minded that he won't listen to the other side of the story. He actually wants the other side of the story to find out the real truth of whether a case of miracle or possession are actually those things, or if it could be explained in a more logical, scientific manner, right? So I really like that he really wants the real truth, like both sides of the story, to actually figure out what the facts are, right? And so there was something that he said in the beginning when he was trying to convince Kristen to work with him in that capacity. He said something about like insanity looking a lot like possession and possession looking a lot like insanity, and like her role would be to figure out which one it is, to assess to really provide her professional knowledge of whether somebody is having psychological or psychiatric type issues, right? And then, that he's fair about hearing that side of things, and really wanting to know the truth. So I really admire that about him. And so it was just kind of surprising when they started revealing more and more about things that happened in David's past and like other sides of his personality. Because, of course, nobody's perfect, right? But it was the other sides of him are so different from the side that you're first presented with, like the fact that he's a drug addict, and then also that he's a sex addict, right? Like those are things that are revealed about him that is just like, oh wow, he's completely different from how he's been presented. But then even after you find out that about him, you still kind of still see him as this really God-filled guy, that it's kind of like your original impressions of him are so strong that it overrides those things that he has done in the past. And then so even when he does do drugs again, and he does fall back into his like sex addict activities, right? Like you still like him as a character, as a person, that you overlook those things. I'm really happy that eventually he was able to see God and have visions without the use of drugs, because that's how I feel about drugs. I know some people use them to relax, and some people use them to have spiritual experiences, and I've never used them myself because I never felt the need to, because meditation takes me right there to that same place. I had my spiritual awakening because of meditation, so I never had to use anything to any kind of like chemical substance to take me to that dimension, to take me to that frequency, right? And so I'm glad that he actually got there eventually too. And there's one thing that the show gets really accurately about using drugs for to see God or to hear God, is that when you do use a substance like that, what happens is that it takes you out of body, right? So that you receive the messages, you get into that frequency, but then eventually when you come back into the body, then you don't really understand those messages, because that's what happens. Is like when you use something to take you into another frequency or dimension, when you get back into your body, because eventually you don't understand that what the stuff that you received from that higher frequency, because there's too much of a gap between where you are on an average in body, and then when you're out of body. It's like receiving dreams. When you go to sleep and you leave your body, and you interact with the non-physical realm, right? When you come back into your body, what you're doing is like you're interpreting the information that you received when you were out of body, but you're interpreting it from the perspective, the point of view of when you're awake, when you're conscious in body on the physical realm. And like a lot of times those things don't make sense anymore, because now you're seeing things through that filter of the human mind, right? And so what happens is like, yeah, when you use drugs is the same thing. Like you're using a substance to kick you into a higher frequency, but it takes you out of your body, right? You receive the messages, you receive the visions, but then when you get back into the body, now you're trying to translate, like, what do all of those images mean? What do all of those messages mean? And you don't know, because now you're back into the frequency where you were before. So what happens, like when you do it through meditation, is that you are meditating consistently, right, in a routine fashion, and so you're raising your vibration incrementally until you're close enough in frequency to match that of your spirits. And so when your spirit communicates to you and you are at that same frequency in body, then you understand everything that your spirit is saying to you, right? Because there's not that jumping of frequencies. So I don't know if that makes sense to most of you out there, but that's just how it works. So I really like how the show got that part, like how they portrayed David going through his visions and stuff like that, and then how at the end when he had his one vision without the drugs, that he understood. It was so clear what the message was from his vision at that point without the drugs. I thought that one episode where he was taken to the hospital because he was stabbed, right? So he was stuck in a hospital with that horrible nurse. And he was like having all of these hallucinations. And, but you know, like the whole episode, you're not really sure whether he is hallucinating and it's not really happening. Like which parts of it were not real and which parts of it were real. Like it was really hard to tell because you're seeing it from his point of view, right? Like under the influence, right? But that one part when he was trying so hard to call Kristen, like call somebody, you know, get access to his phone and stuff like that, where and his hands were tied in those mitts, right? And he had to like roll himself, like throw himself out of the bed and inch across to where his phone was, and to dial the phone with his hands in those mitts. Like that was just, I know he was having such a hard time with it and it was terrible, but it was so hilarious to watch that. Just like, it's like physical comedy. It was it was just so hilarious. It was so funny. Okay, Ben. I feel like Ben is so necessary as a grounding force between the three of them, because I mean, David believes in all of the religious stuff, right? And then you have Kristen who does provide facts, but she's emotional and she's being actively manipulated by Leland, you know? And so I feel like Ben provides this kind of stability within the team where he's skeptical enough to stay grounded and provide like physical world explanations and information to help solve some of the cases. But then at the same time, I mean, he doesn't really admit it to either David or Kristen, but he did admit it to that one girl that he just started dating, that there were some things that he witnessed and experienced that he couldn't explain. And so that kind of like opened up his mind a little bit about it. And I also find that he's kind of like the comedy relief from all of the drama that happens in everybody else's life. So I rather enjoy the Ben character and the stuff that he goes through, especially like when he started dating that girl and she was saying that her sister is always with her. And I understood that because I'm like, yeah, you know, my spirit is always with me and I never feel like I'm alone, right? And but what she meant was like her sister's I guess her sister's dead, right? But like her sister's spirit is with her, or her sister's energy is with her because of the skin graft that she got, and that her sister's energy controls her hand. And I just thought that was so funny that the one time he allows himself to like really open up and talk to somebody about his beliefs and stuff like that, like the doubts that he may be starting to form, you know, about some of his own beliefs, right? That he won't even share with his team members, that he's sharing with this girl. Like the one time he opens up then she comes off as this kind of like, according to him, that's kind of like insane, right? that she would think that her sister's energy controls her hand because of the skin graft. So I thought that was really funny. Another character that I really like is Ben's sister, Karima, right? She's just like a genius, and I really like that about her, that she's able to hack the hackers, and that one part was so creepy when their dad's virtual assistant got hacked and the voice was talking to her and she was talking back, and they were talking about some secret baby, right? And Ben's all like, "What baby?" And I was like, "Oh my God, Karima, did you have a secret baby?" And she ran off like freaked out. I was like, I hope they bring her back some more because I really like that character. And then also one minor character that showed up that I really liked was Grace the Prophet. I thought it was so cool, and I totally understand why she hears God better when she's blowing into the toy balloons. It has to do with, it has a meditative effect, like when you're focusing on blowing something, it's the same thing as when you meditate and you clear your mind, or when you listen to a steady sound and you clear your mind, because it helps you focus, right? So that's what she's doing. That's why like blowing into a balloon helps her focus and helps her hear messages from God better. So that totally makes sense. I know it looks crazy to the other characters on the show, and especially since she's doing it with like toys, right? But I thought it was great how they showed the environment of her being at like a daycare and having all these kids running around and stuff like that, and they're talking about the messages that she's receiving from God. I thought that was really funny how they did that. And then how she showed up in one of David's hallucinations when he was in the hospital, like when he was all drugged up, like she actually showed up and gave him a message to help him out. And I thought that was really cool. So I think that's all I have to say about Evil season 1. Oh, there's this thing about like the beginning credits where they show the title of the show, right? That it makes me laugh every time I see it, because it shows like, I'll show it to you on the screen. So it's black and white, right? And so I think it's supposed to portray like white paint and black things falling, like black like a rosary, falling into white paint. And what happens is like right after it shows that, then the word evil just like shows up, right? The title evil just shows up. But because the white paint kind of looks like milk to me, every time the title evil shows up, it makes me think that they're saying milk is evil. But yeah, and then another interesting thing is that, so at the end of the episode, usually they show that white paint again, right? And they show the names of the creators and, all the end credits and stuff like that. But on some of the episodes, at the end of it, they change it to black paint. So I kind of feel like that's saying like the evil is starting to seep in on some of the characters. Like I tried to see if it coordinated with what was happening within each episode, like because the most obvious person that has changed is Kristen, right? But I'm not seeing that they're doing that like every time she's getting closer to being influenced by evil, that they're showing the black paint at the end. So, but I think maybe their commentary or like it's a signal of evil just beginning to seep in the world, in that world that they're portraying. So I thought that was like a really interesting detail in terms of like design. And then another thing is that all of the episode titles have numbers in them. And the one that I didn't understand was episode 6, where it says let x equal 9. And I have no idea what that means. But yeah, I love this show. It's so good. It's surprisingly so good. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to me talk about shows that I enjoy. Yeah, if you like this audio, go ahead and click on the thumbs up, like it, and share it with your friends who also enjoy magical shows and magical worlds, and subscribe. All right, I will talk more next time. Bye.